Joining me right now is Democratic Congressman Krishnamoorthi, a member of the House Intelligence and Oversight Committees, which are two of the committees involved in the inquiry. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks, Kate.
Your reaction to Kupperman not showing up today?
Well, I think that, as we mentioned in our subpoena to him, not coming in would be considered a potential obstruction of the inquiry, and any blocked testimony or testimony that's being withheld would be considered corroborative of the whistleblower's complaint. I have to tell you that there's been just a parade of witnesses who've come forward, career public servants who are apolitical, sticking their necks on the line to tell the truth. And that's what we would expect of him and others. But obviously, he's made a different choice, at least as of right now.
But, Congressman, tactically, do you wait for a judge to rule on this if a judge is going to weigh in, or do you think you can move ahead with what you have do you not need to hear from him?
I'm going to let Chairman Schiff decide our course with regard to him in particular, but there are other witnesses that are scheduled to come this week before us who are going to provide hopefully even more testimony to flesh out, kind of the full extent of what happened with regard to the Ukraine, as well as who was involved and who directed it. This is very important for us to find out ASAP.
Do you think that he does share an attorney with John Bolton? Kupperman does. He's a longtime associate of John Bolton's. Do you think how Charles Kupperman has reacted to it, the path that he's taken, do you think that is kind of a foreshadowing of how John Bolton will respond if and when you ask him to appear?
I'm not sure. I think that based on press reports, Mr. Bolton has some very strong views about Rudy Giuliani potentially running a shadow foreign policy, not necessarily in the best interest of the country, but perhaps in the best interest of his personal clients, who include Donald Trump, but also potentially foreign actors. So it'll be up to Mr. Bolton to decide, but I hope that all witnesses who are subpoenaed come forward to comply with their duty.
The Wall Street Journal, in speaking to Ambassador Gordon Sondland's attorney, is reporting that when he was speaking before the committees, he told the committees that the president's effort to get Ukraine to investigate Joe Biden in exchange for a White House meeting amounted to a quid pro quo. Is that your understanding of his interview and what he said?
I can't comment on the specifics of his testimony, except that if the press reports are correct, that a White House meeting was conditioned on political investigations of the president's domestic rivals, that would be a big problem, and that would amount to
one of your colleagues, Stephen Lynch, told CNN last night that he wouldn't go into the details, but he also said, I would not dispute what the attorney is saying in part. Would you dispute what the attorney is telling the Wall Street Journal?
Again, I don't want to go into the specifics of his testimony. As I said that day, basically, I left with the impression that Mr. Sondland was somewhat evasive on certain conversations and details. That being said, if for some reason he decides that he wants to supplement his testimony, I'm sure that the committee would want to potentially hear about that, but I'm not going to get ahead of my chairman in terms of what he may or may not do with regard to Mr. Sondland.
Okay. Can I get your reaction also, as a member of the Intelligence Committee, to hearing the news that the leader of ISIS died in a U.S. raid to capture him this weekend?
Sure. I think that the world is better off without his existence. He was a bloodthirsty killer. But I just want to point out a few elements that were essential in capturing and killing him, which is our alliances, which unfortunately the Trump administration has not been fond of, including with the Kurds. Secondly, our intelligence community and the excellent information that they basically provided in identifying his location. Again, a community that's under attack by the president almost constantly. And then third, our presence in northern Syria. We could not have done this without a presence in northern Syria, especially in those areas where ISIS has collected. I'm very concerned that our pullout from northern Syria basically means that ISIS is going to scatter and then pose another threat to us again.
All valid concerns. After all of this feels like a turn, but kind of isn't. I'm sure it is somewhat related. The president appeared at the World Series game last night, and in doing so, he was met you could see it from the video, from the crowd. He was met by loud and sustained boos from parts of the audience, as well as chants of "lock him up" were quite audible. What did you think of that?
I personally don't want to see any president or candidate for president subject to those types of cheers. President Trump, unfortunately, led those similar chants with regard to Hillary Clinton. I thought that was unacceptable then. I don't want to see any president or nominee or any candidate or politician subject to that type of chanting. But that goes to show how much, unfortunately, this president has contributed to the kind of debasing of our political rhetoric, and his use of the term the other day, human scum, to describe Republicans that would disagree with him with regard to this Ukraine matter, just goes to show that he's contributing to the very rhetoric that's being used against him as well.
Congressman, thanks for coming in.
Thank you, Kate.
Appreciate it. Coming up for us.
Thank you.